With the release of the latest Harry Potter trailer for the new show coming out in December, I have just one question. Who is this show even made for? As many of you might know, the last Harry Potter movie only came out around 15 years ago with The Deathly Hallows Part 2. And even if we want to look at the Harry Potter universe as a whole, it's only been 4 years since the last Fantastic Beasts movie released to a 46% tomato meter on Rotten Tomatoes and an IMDb score of a 6.2 out of 10, with the movie having an all-time franchise low, only making $43 million domestically during its opening weekend. The movie financially was a complete failure compared to other entries in the series, making half the money the first Fantastic Beasts movies made, and losing another $200 million since the second movie of the Fantastic Beasts series. By the end of 2022, Fantastic Beasts, originally planned for a 5-movie series, was shelved. But that wasn't the only thing going on with the Harry Potter franchise after the end of the movies. Author of the Harry Potter books J.K. Rowling also was helping write a stage play called Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. And this stage play, for the most part, is heavily criticized. Most of the Harry Potter community does not enjoy it much at all, with every Harry Potter project, whether movie or written material by the author, falling flat. In early 2023, only a few months after rumors had been spiraling about the cancellation of the Fantastic Beasts series being canceled and or shelved, it led to the decision to controversially remake the Harry Potter book series into a show. So why did I bring up all of those failures or the Fantastic Beasts, the Cursed Child? Because it does paint a picture. The Harry Potter IP was struggling to find its footing after the Harry Potter books and movies, because even the author J.K. Rowling did not have many successes outside of the main core series. And I don't need to be the one to tell you, Harry Potter is still a major IP, even with all the failures that have come out with the Fantastic Beasts and the Cursed Child. But it also can point to the idea of the Harry Potter IP was just in a spot where nothing was working, that they were trying to do new. So why not go back and remake the old? It's not a coincidence, in my opinion, that right after a 5-movie series that was initially planned in Fantastic Beasts was canceled, that then the next project for Harry Potter was readapting the book series into live action in a show instead of the movies. And remember, it's not been that long since these movies came out. And so it feels like the Harry Potter brand overall was more scared than anything and said, let's do the old and not try to do something new. In a lot of ways, it's kind of what Hollywood has become at this point, where we're remaking the old or we're leeching off of IPs continuously until there's nothing left. And you think about what's happening with Lord of the Rings right now, with, the failures of Rings of Power, and now we're seeing all these other different movies that are being made that don't really feel like they need to be made overall, leeching off the successes of the Lord of the Rings. And I'm not saying that's what the Harry Potter show is doing, but I think it's to explain why so many, myself included, might have that in the back of their mind, that this might all just be maybe a cash grab. And that is the point of this video, to ask, who is this show really being made for? Like I mentioned, the Harry Potter brand is still strong today, but it has left many, myself included, thinking, weren't the books and the beloved movies enough to tell this story? Do we really need it told to us a third time now through a television show? So what is HBO itself marketing this show to be? They've said it's going to be a faithful book adaptation, as the show will give more time to things that the movies were not able to explore with the books. So the idea is things that they cut from the movies, because the movies were only like 2 hours long. They couldn't include every single detail from the books. And so the idea of a show is, okay, well, we can have 8 episodes that are an hour long and we can fully tell this story. And I think that's especially going to be important for the later books, not so much the first couple, because the first couple are much shorter, and I really don't even think you need 8 episodes, so I'll be interested to see how they do season 1 overall. But I think the point of this is that they're trying to be a faithful adaptation to the books and explore some of the material that was not present in the movies, or things that the movies changed overall. This show is hoping to improve and capitalize itself on. And that is what HBO has told us. Is that the truth? We will not know until the show comes out. But that is what they've told us. So the idea of who HBO is saying this is for is for book readers. Is that truly the case, though? Because over the last 15 years, there's been a lot of criticism drawn to adaptations. For the most part, usually when you hear, oh, we're going to adapt this video game, we're going to adapt this book, we're going to adapt this story, usually it goes horribly wrong. And that's not to say all the time. That is not the case in every situation, but we've seen a lot of examples over the years. Rings of Power is one of the worst shows I've ever seen and is a terrible adaptation of Tolkien's world. House of the Dragon, whether you like it or hate it, the author has publicly stated his disdain for a lot of the changes and even the showrunner Ryan Condal themselves. Or even the Percy Jackson movies, where they have done a reboot now with the show that's kind of getting closer to the source material, but even when those movies came out, they were terribly disrespectful to the author and that source material. So there's a lot of examples to point to and go, maybe we should keep this in the back of our minds. Not to say that the Harry Potter show is going to disrespect the source material like that, but just to suggest why so many people might have that in the back of their minds. And so as the news of this show started to come out, we started to get a lot of castings. Some of them look brilliant, very accurate to what I would expect these characters to look. And that's when it got to the very big controversial moment with the announcement of the casting of Severus Snape with the actor Papa Essiadu, I hope I pronounced that right. And this sparked a lot of debate and conflict in the community, and to me, this was a very big shock. Snape is probably the most important casting outside of the main trio of characters, and so seeing this casting where Snape is very physically defined, where he's this kind of paler, white, ugly guy, and this black, greasy hair. And he's very much the polar opposite of what Papa Essiadu is. Take race out of it. Papa Essiadu is a very attractive man. It does not fit the casting for Snape when Snape is described as not like that at all. And even when you do put race into it, because race to me, a lot of people like to say race swapping is bad no matter what. That is not the case in my opinion. Race swapping can be done and it can be perfectly fine. I mentioned House of the Dragon a little bit earlier, but House of the Dragon actually race swaps an entire family, House of Valerian, and nobody has a problem with that because those actors are fantastic and it doesn't really have much of an effect on the story overall. With the casting of Snape, that is not the case. With race swapping Severus Snape, it changes the dynamic and adds a racial element there that was never present in the book. And just to show an example, for instance, Severus Snape is a character that Harry Potter is instantly suspicious of, instantly is pointing out as somebody that could be evil. And now when you add an element of, okay, well, Severus Snape is going to be one of the few black characters in this show, and all of a sudden Harry Potter is just focusing in on him, it adds a racial element. And I know a lot of people have been making jokes about this, but it is legitimate that there is going to be a different tone and shift when that stuff happens, because is it racially motivated now? And I also think it actually is a bad racial stereotype that this show is prompting when you have one of the few black actors in the show being part of a gang, being part of the Death Eaters that did horrible crimes with Voldemort. To me, that is a terrible racial stereotype that, to me, I just don't understand this casting outside of this. I think the reasoning for this casting, and this is not to say that Papa Essiadu is a bad actor or anything like that, I don't know, I've heard he's a very good actor, but it has nothing to do with that, is that Severus Snape was played by Alan Rickman, a fantastic actor that you cannot replace. It did not matter who stepped into the role of Severus Snape, they were going to be compared to him the entire time. And so I can see the idea of let's do something completely different from Alan Rickman to try and stop those comparisons. And the problem with the casting is now that your legitimacy saying you are claiming that this show is going to be focused on the books and the source material and being faithful to it is kind of null and void now, because before we've even watched the show, you've made a casting that inherently changes the dynamic of characters and creates a racial element that was never present there, and in my opinion is not really needed. It creates things that don't need to be there. And so that right away now gets people thinking, is this show really for book readers at all? Because you've done things to show that that might not be the case. Again, not saying it isn't, But as of right now, there's reason to have concern if you're a book reader thinking this show is made for you. So that leads to, is it made for the generation that grew up with these characters, that loved the Harry Potter movies and the books? I was in that generation. I actually have the Deathly Hallows book that came out from the midnight release of that book. My aunt got it for me. It literally has like the date and all that kind of stuff. So I was the perfect generation for like the movies and the books. Is this made for me? Not really. And I can't say this for everyone, but I just know in people that are my age that I've talked to about this show, the common theme between a lot of us and what I've seen online in the discourse around people my age is this show just doesn't feel like it's needed. We already got that grand story with the movies and with the books. It feels like we're just kind of retreading the same story over and over again. So I really don't feel like this is made for my generation, because a lot of my generation feels like we're kind of just desperately clinging on to the Harry Potter brand when most of the other things in the IP have failed. So that leads me to my only real conclusion that I can make about the Harry Potter show, is that it's being made more for the next generation. You know, the people my age when I was watching the movies, that's now being made for them. And the problem I have with this is, like, do we really need a show for that? You know, the movies don't just disappear because they're now 15 years old, or even, longer if you want to look at the first movie. That doesn't change all of a sudden because time has gone by. The Lord of the Rings movies are still considered maybe the greatest trilogy of all time, and we're, 20 years past them at this point. The books, are they ever going to go away? No, they are one of the most successful books of all time. So the idea that you can't just, the next generation can't just watch the movies that still have aged remarkably well, I just don't see the point of it. And I think that's the point of this video, is like, not to say that I'm not interested to see the Harry Potter show and I'm not going to talk about it and want to watch it and just see curiously what they do with the amount of time that they have. But it kind of is to show the point of, like, who is this story made for and why is it being made to begin with? And that's where I think a lot of negativity spirals into it, is like, is it for money? Is it just for that? Is it for greed? Is there no other reason than just that? And that's where I want to give the floor to you guys. Please be respectful in the comments, but what do you think about this show? Why was it made, and who was it made for? And thank you guys all for watching. Subscribe if you're new. I will be covering other stuff, not just Harry Potter, but this is the starting video I wanted to make because I feel like this has been so prevalent in pop culture at the moment, in our media. But I do plan to cover other things, like maybe dabble in some Star Wars, Marvel, all that kind of stuff. But thank you guys all for watching, and I'll see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys.